Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone to the Mountain View Community Subcommittee meeting. We're getting started just a little bit late because we wanted to have enough time to let everybody eat a little lunch and get the audio and video equipment moved from the county administration building over here. We met last Friday and we asked for some things to be presented for us to review today, and we also spent the morning doing a review of the budget in front of with the whole delegation, and a couple things came through there that may be perhaps worth discussing. Director Chandler mentioned to me that we did have one question regarding when we were talking about the increase in the nursing department and the LNA line, what was discussed over there, that essentially the contract allows for a 40 cent per hour addition by contract when it renews at the beginning of April, but also is being proposed is an additional $1 to the starting wage for LNAs. So basically the average overall increase as of April 1st would be $1.40, but there'd be essentially a $1 increase proposed for any new or beginning wage LNAs, but there are some in that category that have received contractual increases. So they're a little more than the $10 an hour, but they're not all the way up to the $11 an hour for the proposed new starting wage. So some of that is some incremental to catch up some of the other folks that are already employed. So we were painting with a little bit of a broad brush, but the important part is that the impact on the overall budget was presented and is in the commissioner's budget. Like, we don't need to make any adjustments if this proposal is approved. And quite frankly, I mean, we would approve it by virtue of whether or not we appropriate the funds. The amount of money that they spend per se, per wage, per person, isn't really, technically our purview. But how much we appropriate for overall salary is. So that's what we need to look at when we do that. Representative Butler.
Thank you. A couple of just structural questions. Are we going to meet again? And what is your expectation for the process in which the subcommittee will say, all right, we've done it, we have made whatever suggestions and changes we want. And then the next question is, since we're talking about this line, do you want to agree to it, or what's the process?
Well, I envision the process as being this, is that, since we were given a date that was the 22nd of February, that certainly gives us a lot of time between now and then. So I would anticipate that we probably would want to meet one more time. If the chairman said we were presenting next Monday, I might say we need to, kind of draw the line and take a vote. So at this point, I envision that we would meet one more time somewhere in the interim. And at that time, and it could be part of our discussion today, but that we would entertain all of the proposed wage increases, all the proposed FTE increases, and that we would, as a group, would either vote to recommend them or vote not to recommend them.
Department by department?
Right. That we would vote on anything where we are in a sense advocating the increased number of hours that are allowed, that we would have a vote on that, and we would recommend or not recommend those things. And then there may be a couple other items within the budget that we might want to consider, a change on. So anything that, we want to make a change on, we make a vote on whether to recommend we do that or not. Then when we get done, we'll make an overall recommendation, a vote on whether we recommend the overall budget or not. And hopefully come to a consensus, at least by majority vote, of what we're willing to recommend. But that would be in the totality of kind of breaking down these certain, I think, key items, which I believe that, anytime we're bringing on new personnel within that we should vote on.
One additional question. I thank them for redoing these in a format that's readable. How many employees are in each one of these? Could you give us an idea of what we're talking about for administration and dietary and everything? Should we back to that? I would find that helpful in looking at.
Do you have it broken down by total hours?
I have.
Is that easier?
By FTEs.
Yeah. Full-time employees? Equivalency? Okay. So that's fine. I don't think I think that's really what he wants.
Okay.
Is how many full-time employees that extrapolates out, not do you have,
That's
how many,
that's the most helpful.
Is that all right?
Yeah, I guess I'm confused with the FT. I know it's
and basically,
full.
if there's 2 people who work 20 hours a week, that counts as 1 full-time employee. That's 40 hours a week.
The number of 40-hour people.
Okay, but as far as benefits go, then if you have 2 20s, do they both get benefits, or only one of it?
Neither one.
Neither one.
How many hours in order to receive benefits?
Depends what you're going to use it for.
32.
Yeah, they get dental before that, and dental's lower than 32 hours.
Okay.
Well,
So-
the only reason
Go ahead.
the only reason that I asked that is we came from the other meeting and where they were talking about retirement expenses and that type of thing, where it really jumped. So I'm wondering, maybe they don't give the retirement here, but just how much yours increased by how many employees you have. That's where I was coming from. How many employees can get into the retirement system?
How many benefited employees?
That's correct.
Okay, and
So I can get that for you. but
All right.
I don't have that written down.
but that's good. Now that we know what you want, that's
I'm sorry, I
it's
didn't
a
explain.
different
Yeah.
equation. That's,
Right.
Thank you very
but
much.
that's a fair question.
Representative McConkey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One thing, could I get a copy of the updated list right there? And secondly, did I understand your conversation when I walked in that the $1.40 anticipated for the LNAs to bring them in line with it? We've seen the report, what those outlying areas are paying. Is that already in the new, is that in the adopted, the commissioner's budget that they presented previously, or is that an update?
That's in the commissioner's budget that was
The dollar.
filed, that's my understanding, that was filed with Concord.
Okay, thank
So
you.
there's
No changes.
no changes necessary in the commissioner's line in order.
Sounds good. Do we have that supportive material yet? That's still forthcoming?
That is still forthcoming, and hopefully we'll be getting to that hopefully we'll be getting to that very shortly. We'll see. It was just talked about it on Friday, so.
My understanding is they couldn't get any information locally.
I did
They
between
wouldn't give it out.
meetings. I found out this morning between meetings. I pulled some strings. And
Well, and
at least from Wolfboro Bay, have some accurate information.
I have some feelers out as well.
You can't get it from your old employer now?
Well, I know what's going on in Meredith.
Boss.
Oh, I can tell you Golden View in Meredith, but I didn't know if Wolfboro would be different. As it turns out, it varies some, but not by much.
Okay, terrific. So yeah, we're going to be looking at that, and yes, it was mentioned that there was some difficulty receiving the information, but we endeavored to try maybe some new methodologies to maybe find out what the competition was locally, and hopefully it bore some it did bear some fruit. It sounds like it did. So I guess in answer to Representative Butler's question, that's my hope. I think that it's probably wise that we just, kind of cover as much as we can today with, the time constraints that we have, and try to get the meeting, convened pretty close to 2 o'clock, since one of our members can really only stay till then, with the idea of the fact that, we certainly have an opportunity to meet again, with, a whole month before we actually had to, present to the full delegation, and it may be well worth our while. But, we can maybe get some input, on these particular items. So, I guess without further ado, what can you, because I think that's probably first on my agenda, just by virtue of turning pages, here, would be on page 23 regarding the increase nursing plus the $1 an hour for the LNAs.
Which piece is the budget using this thing we just got? Budget. You don't have 22 pages there, right?
Either way.
Either way can work. It would be the 3rd page, nursing department. And it would be 5140.07089 and 11.
And the numbers are exactly the same on the 2 pages.
I hope
So, yeah, and we have that differential. It's outstanding work. Thank you very much, Paula, for putting it together for us. But do we have Director Chandler? Do you have some information? Or?
The salary differential locally, while we are at the low end of the county system, we are pretty much on scale locally. They're starting inexperienced people at $10 an hour. We're starting virtually everybody at $10 an hour, although we do have a provision that we haven't used where we could start them higher. So we are competitive locally. We are not competitively in the county system.
I'm sorry, say that again. We're competitive locally, but we're not competitive in the county system.
Correct.
That's what you said, okay.
So we're significantly behind if compared to other county homes, but compared to local, and I can confirm that that's the same in the Meredith market as it is here. We're competitive locally.
Okay.
Now, if there's a difference with Wolfboro Bay, is that they're much more willing to pay experienced people more. So my fear is that we train them and then they move there, where they work here, they get the experience, and then all of a sudden they get a $2 raise when they move down the street. So there's a bit of a revolving door.
Okay. So now you mentioned a provision, and that provision, could you expound upon that? I'm assuming that there's a probationary type period that you can use to help make it a provision, but why don't you amplify how you could?
Well, as the story goes, the previous director of nursing did not use that provision. So for some period of time, and maybe Paula knows, that we have been paying everybody, regardless of ability, the same, and not reviewing not doing a 3-month or a 6-month review, as we actually have our pay scale actually provides for.
So you can provide incentives?
We can.
Okay, and that would be...
But it's not been budgeted for, so it wasn't exercised. So it wasn't anybody being mean. It's they budgeted for the minimum and then said, well, we don't have them. We have the procedural ability, but not the budgeted ability to do it.
Okay, Commissioner Babson, sorry.
Yes, it's been kind of a bone of contention with me over the years with training people in the league. How do you have within your system here, if we're training somebody to get a commitment that they stay a year or 2 to pay us back if we're paying for their training?
Well, it's better right now. It's better than that because the state pays for their training. So that if somebody graduates from a program that we held here in the fall, it costs about $1,200. It's actually a moneymaker for us. If they then come and work here, I think they just have to work here. They don't have to, it's not even 3 months. They submit to the state for reimbursement and they get that back. And I've signed off on 2 of those already.
So we're not paying anybody for the certification?
No, and the rationale there is, rather than be in the giving scholarship business, these gals and guys get the money from wherever they have to. They're showing commitment, but if they finish the course and they get it and they take a job, a full-time job, they get reimbursed by the state, which is wonderful for us.
Is it, if I might ask, is there any amount of time, or that they're hired and they take the job?
I think
like a 3 months of...
No, state just wants certification that they're employed full-time.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Representative Butler.
Thank you. So the issue that Representative Umberger brought up this morning about the revolving door and the concern that and as you've mentioned, that people are starting here but leaving quickly, is that, how much of a reality is that? And how much of a negative on your operations is it?
Well, when you pay $10 an hour, you're competing with McDonald's, and just about anything else. It's a sad fact. Well, most of our new LNAs are going to be younger people. For younger people, the presence of benefits is wasted on them. Now, while we represent a greater value than other employers, that's wasted on the people that we're trying to hire. They're living day to day, and they're living by the hourly wage. So they'll leave us for 50 cents. They'll leave us for 75 cents. My bigger concern is that we're not able to attract the experienced people so that we don't have to take a chance. We should be hiring the people that have been trained at Wolfboro Bay, not having our people go there.
So I guess my question, that leads me to the question of how about at Wolfboro Bay as far as their benefits package in comparison?
It wouldn't be but half. On a good day, and now that Genesis owns them, I'm not sure that it'll even be as good as it was before. But you can't beat the benefit package as offered by the county.
Okay, so basically the wages equal, but our benefits are far greater.
Correct.
A part of your concern is that target employee market, or the market for that job, is maybe more in tune with wages than they are benefits.
Exactly.
Commissioner Babson.
Two points. One, Representative Paula, to answer your question, I believe we lost 11 employees last year at the jail. And it isn't just in this building there's a rollover. The other question is this the same Genesis that bought Wolfboro that does all our stuff here?
It is.
What is their incentive for them to help us versus helping putting their efforts into their own facility 10 miles away?
There isn't any. Now, nor has there been. They would argue that their job is to provide the therapy services to the people that we bring in. And to that degree, they're right. So they're not going to help.
You mean their services to the residents that we have here isn't the same, obviously the same bunch of residents they have in Wolfboro, so they have an interest in servicing these people because they're here in Ossipee.
Right, but there's no incentive to them to bring them in. That has and always been our job. So that what we need to do is to find a way, less than competing with Genesis and Wolfboro, we're competing with where I want to bring our skilled people in from are for the people that are getting hip replacements in Laconia and staying in Laconia, because there's not a whole lot of orthopedic surgery going on at Huggins. We need to be getting the people that are going out of town for surgeries, Carroll County people, who will go to Manchester, will go to Rochester, will go to Laconia, and go to nursing homes, rehab centers there, instead of coming here. And we need to educate, inform, and we really have to go door knocking to educate these people that this is it costs them the same. Medicare pays for it, that they should be having that care and services here. But your point's well taken. I did worry a little bit when I heard that the Genesis was going there. Would it be good for us or bad for us? I'm comfortable now that their presence there will not have any negative effect.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative McCarthy.
Thank you.
McConkey, I apologize.
So the idea then is to have a pool of money, this money that we're looking at, and then use that for incentive pay to either bring in more skilled or to reward better workers.
Correct. Well, I don't think there's anything about it would be we don't have a pay for performance system in place, but Becky does have a chart based on years of experience. So somebody coming in with 5 years of experience, if we had the money for it, would be able to start at a higher amount. Although she would like, and it is what she presented to the commissioners, she would very much like to bring up that entry wage for somebody that a newly minted LNA to essentially go from $10 an hour to $11 an hour.
If I remember right, you said there was a process, there's the availability of a 3-month review, 6-month review, or some period of time.
There is.
Wouldn't it be better if I'm asking the question, if we're competitive on that price, but we're giving the extra benefit package there, would you be better to hold some of that for someone that stayed 3 months, 6 months, and then they're at the period that they may not want to switch at that point, as opposed to paying them from day one?
I think so.
And a follow-up to that, that makes sense to me too. If the $1.40 is in this number, then isn't it possible for you and your administration and your nursing department to determine how to use that, and that the possibility is there for the incentive pay to encourage those people who you want to encourage, so that the initial starting salary might not be $11, it might be something else, and then you can use some of that money for the incentive pay that is not necessarily in this number.
I think that'd be better, because the idea of giving somebody, essentially what it does, it also forces supervisors to do that review. So someone's not just here for the ride, making that decision to keep somebody or to let them go during the probationary time, but if they're good, to be able to reward them and to provide incentive for staying. It's more complicated, but it's worth the effort. I mean, our biggest asset here is our people. I think that's well worth the effort, and it's something we haven't apparently been doing during the past few years that we need to reintroduce.
Okay, so I guess the question that comes to light, at least in my mind, would be that would there be
What is the incentive to not give an incentive?
the ability to decrease or adjust the asks for that
The idea is to
within the commission's budget? I mean, is that trying to, so, because basically what we are providing for is, or proposing would be that keep your starting wage the same, but incrementally allow people 3-month and 6-month review.
That would be ideal.
And within the contract, they'd be eligible for how much per hour increase based on those reviews? Are there parameters for the maximums?
I'm not sure that's part of the contract. I think that's part of administrative policy. So I don't believe that is anything that has been part of the collective bargaining.
But,
I don't think so.
so there wouldn't be any conflicts between. So it doesn't present any conflicts with the contract with the union as far as giving these reviews at 3 months, as long as you either got it or you didn't get it, and that's.
As long as the starting wage is not greater than the minimum under collective bargaining. And that was actually part of what Becky had also put forward, that if we increase the raises for new people, we might also have to increase incrementally, not the same
Right.
amount.
But
So
whatever
that,
that difference
but
is.
anything under that amount is not subject to collective bargaining. So we can introduce a laddered system administratively.
Okay. Well, that certainly sounds productive. And now, would this be something where you could... You also mentioned that you had concerns that group of folks may be disinterested in the benefits package and maybe looking toward the wages. Is there anything within our abilities to provide additional wages in lieu of the benefit package? Like if a new employee started, I'm shooting from the hip right now, just through the conversation. So you have an employee who doesn't want to take the benefits package. Would it be possible to have an incentive within your framework to say, well, if you don't take medical insurance, and instead of that, we'll pay you an extra 50 cents an hour.
We do with our per diem staff, where we're not guaranteeing scheduled hours to. So they are paid a cash premium, but they also don't have the security of knowing that they'll always be guaranteed hours. And it ends up being a lucrative to them, but not a bad thing for the county either. It's not the ideal way of doing things, but it's a way of having something to offer those people who only want cash. But they are not regularly scheduled.
Okay, so under the current situation, if you were hired to someone full-time, then from the onset, you could not offer them a premium wage based on the fact that they don't take medical insurance.
There's nothing in place, yeah.
Contractually, I don't think you can.
So you'd be prohibited from doing that. Okay. Yes, Commissioner Babson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's something that I would fight to my last breath. I don't believe that anybody should be reimbursed for a benefit they don't take. A benefit is something you give to enhance a package. Because you don't take it, you shouldn't get paid for it. We do that in Ossipee. We pay an individual because he doesn't take his medical insurance. The next thing you know, everybody will be doing the same thing. It's just not a good idea. If they want the benefit package, let them take it. If they don't, this is what we pay for the starting wage.
I just want to clarify something that you just said. In Ossipee, we do pay them if they don't take it, but only if they have it somewhere else. So, in other words, you can't just not take it, medical insurance. And in a case like that, whatever it would have cost us for medical insurance, we will give them 3% of that annual fee. This is what I'm saying.
Okay.
And it saves the town money, no question about it. I mean, I can live with that.
Not very generous.
8%, 3%.
Well, I guess I'm the chairman, so I guess I can't make an editorial comment, but based on the fact that they would be taking the insurance anyway because their spouse is covering them, you're not saving the taxpayers' money, you're spending. I would do it exactly the opposite. I would do it I would do it exactly the opposite of what you explained.
I'm interested in, as long as it's legal, in saving the town money. That's what I'm doing.
I agree, and there may be some there may be some motivation for people to decide for the spouse to take the insurance if they'll get a little more and switch over. So I guess there may be some added benefit, but once again, that's things to put in people's minds just as far as going forward in the future. If it's something that might be reasonable, if it's something that might be helpful to actually entice folks to come here and save money, it may be worthwhile. But there's certainly no question that when we're looking at a job that pays $10 an hour, and $10 an hour by 2,080 hours extrapolates out to $20,800. When that person has a medical insurance benefit that for a family has an annualized cost of $23,000, you can see how the wage versus the benefit for that wage is just amazingly seems out of proportion. And you know, there's something that's not quite right when you're looking at that sort of situation. And you know, Representative McConkey, you know, brought in a previous meeting about how we should really consider single plans is what we pay for, and then a enhanced contribution for additional for a spouse, and you know, we pay 80-20. Well, maybe it better be whatever 70-30, and then for kids it's, you know, because that's of the way it is. But on the other hand, I find it personally amazing to think that the L&A turnover rate here would be even close to as high as any of these other places that don't offer the benefit package that we offer. I would think that our L&As would be at least have twice the longevity here as they would at other places. At the minimum, I mean, that's just my knee-jerk gut reaction. But when you're, you know, in consideration of that, you know, if I was a young single mother and I had 2 children and I had a choice of working here or working at where I employ people, I'd be here 1,000,000 times before I came to work for me. 1,000,000 at the least. You know, it's just an unbelievable package, and I would think that those people would be very hard pressed to leave, or just nonsensical, or not really like the work, which isn't going to change.
Last week I sat down with one of our housekeepers, a delightful young gal, working 32 hours. And I said, why aren't you pushing to work 40 hours? I said, you know, she doesn't have health insurance now. She would at 40. She doesn't want to work the extra. It's a lifestyle decision. She has a baby at home, and I'm trying to talk her into, you should be here demanding. I want the first 8 hours of. I'm not sure that, I think she's typical. She certainly doesn't represent everybody. But there are a number of young people for whom the hourly wage, which she was concerned about, is much more important than the benefit that, as you point out, that's worth at least as much as her hourly wage. And it doesn't make sense.
It will be interesting as the healthcare payment system changes, how it affects this population that doesn't feel that they need healthcare insurance, and that isn't a driver in their decision making.
No, they're 24 years old and invincible, and they don't mind going bare.
And if they go to the hospital and somebody else pays for it, so be it.
I bet you that's more of an incentive than any of it. They know they're not going to be denied service.
Yeah. Well, that's certainly a big tent issue that goes beyond our constraints, but well-founded, absolutely.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Rips.
In these L&A and M&A lines, the increase in staffing, separate from the increase in wage, is what?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Because I believe you said some of it was L&A money going down the M&A money, and some of it is the differential.
Right. The LPN line item's down 17,000, the RN's down money. Shifting those over to the M&A line item. They are hiring, I believe it's one additional FTE, one additional full-time person.
In an M&A.
So that's directly attributable to that line 11? That's where the extra 40-hour FTE is in that line, and then that the increase in the L&A is purely, well, not purely, because there's 40 cents an hour increase due to the contract, but the other, the balance of that money is for the raising the starting wage.
So it's a reallocation plus one full-time position.
Right, but the line is on line 7. That is all due to wage modification, and then that line 11 is due to an additional one full-time person. And do you happen to have what that number is for money?
Mr. Chairman, the amount for the dollar over was 51,000 something. I can't find it, I had it
For the
here
raises?
somewhere.
For the raises?
Yeah.
It's a little over 61,000.
But that included the 40%,
No.
right, Paul?
Just
I
a
think
dollar.
That
That
61,000
was just
was
a
just
dollar?
to bump everybody up.
I don't believe it, so maybe I wrote it down wrong.
I have, that's the wage increase. That's what Becky's, so that has nothing to do with that raise.
It's got it right here.
For the M&As, it's roughly 31,000.
And that's for the person, or another person?
You said 31 or 40?
31.
And the additional is the extra 40 cents an hour. The other,
And then the shifting of we shifted money
Oh.
from LPNs.
okay,
to
gotcha.
RNs.
Okay. So that's good information for us. We, I don't know, what's the pleasure of the subcommittee? I kind of feel like, to me, kind of shooting from the hip, and it would be that if we did allow maybe half of that 61,000 for the bump to be used for the, it would probably be about the right amount of money to fund the performance incentive program. So instead of, so we could, so essentially we could reduce that line for the LNAs about $30,000, nix the $1, the idea of adding, giving everybody an additional $1 an hour, but still would allow enough money for them to procedurally implement the idea of a 3- and 6-month performance raise. That's kind of how.
Just to figure 61.
Paul's raising the question, it's, you know, there's some internal disparity that we have in starting rates where actually dining services can start higher than LNAs. And so, now whether that's a factor in all this, it should be something that you should know. And I know that parity was something that Becky was reaching for, but.
So dietary starts at 11?
No, they both start at 10, but you can wash dishes and dietary for $10. You can be an LMA and take care of residents for $10 an hour. I think that's a little.
The feeling is, you know, if housekeepers and a dishwasher are both getting paid $10 an hour, isn't an LNA worth more right from the start?
In all three job categories, you see the same eligibility benefits-wise?
Exactly the same.
But Representative Algren is wondering whether or not if we didn't do 140 in this raise, instead we did 110, wouldn't there still be the potential for a raise and incentive and all of those things?
I bet we could come back to you with another proposal with some real numbers based on a known scale to be able to present to you.
Thank you.
And we know it's going to be less. And it could well be the half that you're talking about, but that would be
Okay.
but we could take that as instruction to come back with an organized program that would bring people in and show a progressive ladder through that first year.
Okay. Because obviously somebody who's been here 3 or 6 months is performing, or we would hope at least at that point, performing at a much higher level than somebody on day 2. But
Yeah,
Right.
I'm not against this, and I think it might be a good idea, but I think we ought to be very careful. We're cutting things, and what we're cutting are things that people, particularly good people, need. And I've always been of the feeling that if you've got good people, you pay them to try to keep them and make you cut somewhere else and try to make it up later. So I think it's well worth looking into, but I think we ought to be very careful. You know, in all honesty, in today's market, you're not going to get rich on $10 an hour.
no.
Well, and I'm a Democrat.
I know that.
So I should be supporting this, but I also think that if the wages are competitive and the benefit package is good, that we shouldn't shy away from the possibility of not needing to increase the salary lines by $200,000.
But didn't we need to give them this $1,000 to bring them up to make the wages?
I think that's what we're still trying to determine.
No, locally, they're comparable, within the county system, they're low. There's no question about that. The other county homes are starting at $11 and $12 an hour, and throughout the state. But in the local market, the Lakes region, north of Concord, we're competitive.
It bothers me considerably too that we're starting people who basically, you're comparing skills to all these different things, and some are lower than others for what I would call the same skills based on what you're telling me. That doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't. I mean, the LNAs are doing the critical part of the jobs here. I mean, that's the quality of care we provide in large measure is going to be determined by the quality of the LNA.
And I'm cheap too. It doesn't mean everyone's, giving this, but it just
these gals and guys
sense.
now too, they're hard working and they're getting paid the same as though they have no skills. Or no experience coming in, working in whether, not that there's anything the matter with our housekeepers or a dining aid, don't want to take anything away from them, but they don't have nearly the skills, the training, and the aptitude that our LNAs do.
Can I see that when you're done, Dave?
Okay, so, it would be, I think, helpful at our next meeting date, which is to be determined, if maybe we could take, a look at if there's any blend of the two, or where instead of having this dollar increase, perhaps having maybe 50 cents of it be an increase, and then but also being able to have the 3 and 6 month reviews, performance reviews, and see if that extrapolates to a savings on that line that we might be able to vote for as something that we would.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
We're talking about increasing the base rate, right? From $10 to $11?
Correct.
What happens to those that are making $18?
Nothing.
Nothing. They don't get the dollar?
No. Not in accordance to what was presented to us. I mean,
But they do get the 40 cents.
Correct.
They get the people who get the 40 cents. Yeah,
Everybody
40 cents.
gets 40
Everybody's
cents.
getting their 40 cents, right?
Yeah.
Everyone gets 40 cents per the contract. That's part of the. But
Only those people that are at $10 are going to get $11.
The only exception
Now,
to
what
that,
happens to those that are getting $11 now? Shouldn't they go up to?
well, they're going to go.
They're going to go 40 cents, but
I think that there's something to be said for that.
Mr. Chairman, are we going to run into a union problem?
yeah.
Because we tried this once in Ossipee, in that we tried to promote the base pay on somebody because we didn't feel they were making enough money. And the union came back and said, you can't do this unless you raise everybody's pay.
Yeah.
we don't have to raise everybody's, but we are contractually obligated or by collective bargaining. We can't have somebody start at a higher level than somebody already is.
Yeah.
So there are some people at the lower tier that might be at 1120, 1140 that are going to have to be bumped up a little bit, not proportional to the others.
Mm-hmm.
So there is, and Becky did factor that into that number. So there are some people that'll be getting 50-cent raises and other people who'll be getting, $1 raises, just to catch up. But it doesn't go through the whole spectrum, just at the bottom tier.
But and then subsequently, the starting wage is going to be $11 an hour. Will be the starting wage, not $11.40 an hour. Is that correct?
That's what we
Because
propose.
presently there's some.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. Did I understand you to just ask the question? And it's a good point. If they're going to go up a dollar for the plus to 40 cents,
Right.
why isn't it $1? Your question is, why isn't it $11.40, right?
Well, correct. I'm just trying to make the determination of, and when this gets implemented, that we don't perhaps run into that situation because of this floor. You know, we're really increasing the floor wage when we're doing this. And so it would seem to me to be wise that you would have certain people who are making $11 now, and they are going to be making $11.40 starting April 1, that there aren't people making $10 now who will be bumped up to $11 before April 1, and then going all the way up to $11.40 by April 1. That would seem to be where the people making $11.40 would not feel very, you know.
Well, and that's why this morning I interpreted the raise into the next fiscal year, budget year, as 60 cents. Because, you know, theoretically, if we go to it, they're not going to get that extra 40 cents. So.
Union all gets their raises the 1st of April.
Right. So I'm just.
And that's going to be 40 cents on this $10 an hour.
Right.
And that's where your 60 cents came
gets
from.
up to 11.
Thank you. It took me, several hours.
So I was just concerned that somehow during the process of implementation, if someone is now making 10 and then they're raised to 11, and then April 1st comes, does that person now get 11.40 instead of 11? I just want to make sure that, however we put this together, that doesn't occur just because we're going to have such a large floor wage, you know, of people, you know, based on 40 cents an hour, you could be here for 2.5 years and be making now the same as somebody just started, which is part of the problem.
Yep. And if I could, Mr. Chair, and it would, your proposal to come in with some structural way to deal with this would be nice, because you could hire somebody at 10.25 an hour and 3 months later increase them to 10.75 and 6 months later to 11 or whatever. That would give them the incentive to stay and still positively impact the budget. So.
Okay, so I think we at least like to see that, and I have a feeling that we might be able to save $20,000-$30,000 if we implement something like that from that proposed line. Does anyone have any thoughts about adding an extra medical nursing assistant? Basically 40 hours a week in that particular function, which extrapolates out to $31,000.
Are you on this sheet?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, under nursing department, line number 11.
Third page.
Oh, third page, okay.
But they moved some money down from LPN and RN toward that to that line, I believe, is part of it. But the objective, which is around 10,000, 11,000 looks like, but about $31,000 additional is attributed toward adding a full-time employee. So they're making $15 an hour, essentially. Representative McConkey.
I'm sorry, maybe I missed it in the last meeting. The need for that position is what? To increase that nurse by one position? Does that save us on overtime or bringing in someone from the outside to fill vacancies? Where's the need?
There would be some of that because you can run short. Right now, when you run bare minimum as in a small place, and this is still considered a small place, the absence of anyone means bringing somebody in either at overtime, at a incentive, or in a worst case at agency. We essentially have 4 mountains in 8 neighborhoods. In a perfect world, they should be staffed with, each mountain should have 4 LNAs. Each neighborhood should have 2 LNAs per shift on first and second shift. And we presently don't have that on second shifts. This is getting us up to where we should be. It will never pay for itself by not with savings in overtime or agency, but it will help.
Follow?
Yeah, thank you. And I'm very respectful of the job you're doing. I'm very respectful of the job that the past administrator did. I've been around the county long enough that I've been sold the bill of goods enough times, whether it be a jail or whether it be a nursing home, that a new building, larger, bigger, better, is going to be run more economically, just to be every year or 2 years brought in here and told how I need more personnel, more personnel, more personnel. Is there a medical need for this person to be added? Where we sold a bill of goods last round, we didn't need this person. If the mountain and the neighborhood needed these people, then I think someone should have come forward previous to tell us that. So it's nice to have personnel. If the person was going to save us for having to bring in other people and paying an exorbitant rate, I'd be in agreement. My question is, where's the medical need? Could we go another year without this?
If I could, Mr. Chair.
You may respond.
Thanks. Actually, I wasn't here, but I did watch the tape on the presentation from the Director of Nursing, and I heard her talk about sometimes she'll fill the position for overtime simply to help save on the per diem cost of bringing in overtime. And I do see the reduction in line in overtime and the reduction in other salaries. And I do believe that some of her rationale was that this position would help to prevent as much expense in overtime. I don't know, Mr. Chandler, you said that it's not going to cover it all, and I believe, I'm sure you're telling us the truth, but it seemed to me that that was part of her rationale.
It is. The other part that is tough to put a number on is we try to increase our revenues by increasing Medicare and private pay. We are now, I'm pleased to be able to report on the Medicare comparisons of nursing homes, a 5-star, which is the highest rating there is. That's very attractive to private pay, very attractive to Medicare. It's right now we are averaging 4.6 hours of direct care per day. That is not, while that is at the solidly in the upper quartile, it's not excessive. So we are not excessive in what we're doing, but we're just trying to maintain that standard.
And I appreciate that level of service that we're providing, I truly do. But 5-star doesn't make me, if I own this facility as a private business, and I have X number of beds, and those beds are going to be filled like this right now, the problem is we can't get some of our long-term stays so that we could get that rehabilitative monies. 5-star doesn't get me more money than 4.6.
It might get you more private pay, it might get you more Medicare, it might improve your
If I had more beds.
Correct.
And I don't have more beds here. I appreciate it. I'm not speaking against personnel or whatever. If it's not a medical need, I'm not in support.
I would worry at the delegation level if we were pushing for non-direct staff. Support staff is a place that you always want to minimize and look at with technology and others. But when you talk about the LNA, that's the boots on the ground type of person. That's where the quality really is. So that and the activity people and housekeepers, those are the front line people.
Okay. Well, all right. Well, let's put that, kind of on hold and move on. And we'll just look at other departments, since you kind of opened the door to maybe perhaps some ancillary folks that may not be necessary. So let's take that under advisement, and we'll move forward and look at this to our next increase in FTE hourly folks, which I believe is in housekeeping. Which on the sheet is under housekeeping department. Unfortunately, they're not numbered, but it'd be 5170 is will help get you there. And it looks like it's
Page 26, Mr. Chairman.
It looks like it's the 4th page of this handout, page 26 of the big full budget thingamajig. So there on line 10 salaries, we have for housekeeping, we have $285,000 is the budgeted, which is basically adding 32 hours a week to the housekeeping department, which is that a $10 an hour? How much money is that? I guess would be the best way to answer.
10 days this week, 10 hours.
That's what, Paula?
10.
And what's the housekeeping staffing now?
Right now, Deb has nine?
So we're
Nine, including yourself, including a working supervisor.
So we're looking at about 15,000 hours for the year.
9.
32 times 50. Yeah, okay. So we're looking at about 15,000 hours per year at $10 an hour. So it's about, this is about $15,000 into that line. So if we were to not feel like that's a justified position, then, you know, we would just simply knock $15,000 off that line. That's the math, okay? But why don't you remind us why this extra 32 hours a week, which was essentially 4 days, 8 hours a day, I think was how it was presented to us, but what the kind of the nuts and bolts, boots on the ground differential that'll make in the operations?
Well, think, if you will, in the old building, same number of residents, 2 to a room, 4 to a bathroom. It meant that you had essentially, for round figures, 30 rooms. Here you have 103 rooms. There you had roughly 30 bathrooms. Here you have 103 bathrooms. So the housekeeping load has increased by about a factor of 4, while the staff remain the same. They've done yeoman's duty. The problem, of course, ends up being not the Monday to Friday. It ends up we don't close on the weekends, and we close at 4 o'clock. So our evening staff and our weekend staff have been very slim, and it's, you know, having only 3 people working over the weekend is cutting it. You know, and remember, there's still the same 103 residents, and we reduce our weekend staffing to 3, and that's not. It's far less than ideal.
Do we pay extra for weekend staff to make it more?
They do get a differential, and I don't know how much that is.
I think it's 90 cents or $1, I believe.
90
Much?
cents or $1.
$1 an hour
I believe so.
for everybody across the board?
Plus you get an evening differential
Right.
too. Plus you get 2 differentials, evening and weekend.
I don't know
A
how
third
accurate,
shift, I should say.
I don't know how accurate this is, but it looks to me like average you're getting about $14 an hour in the housekeeping staff.
There's some that make almost $18 an hour in housekeeping.
Mm-hmm.
Housekeeping staff is, if you talk about our LNAs as being the younger, new people, our housekeeping staff are people that have been with us for years and years and years. They're well established.
And I thank you for your presentation, and I will, I guess, iterate that I think part of what Representative McConkey is driving at is that we were told, or it was presented to us, that you mentioned that there's this many more bathrooms. And we, during the course of deliberations on the building of the facility, presented that as what, you know, there's going to be a greater need. And that was quelled by the fact that we were adding 2 additional people to the plant operations. Okay, so for some of us, it kind of falls on deaf ears. That assertion is that because now you have more bathrooms, you need more in the housekeeping, when it was presented to us that that would be made up for by the 2 additional people in plant operations. I think is pretty much a synopsis of what Representative McConkey might be saying.
That'd be correct, Mr. Chairman.
So that's where I think some of us, around the table might sit on that position, is because that's what we were told when we presented a question directly about the bathrooms and the need for more housekeeping.
Well, I don't know what was said before, but I know plant operations does take care of all the floors, and so that the extra staffing there clearly has been needed, and they're clearly busy, but it doesn't address the bathrooms or the resident rooms at all. And that's where the request for housekeeping, comes from.
Okay. Representative McConkey.
Mr. Chairman, I would just follow up that the time spent on floors and extra maintenance and so forth, we were told that was not going to increase more than the need of a half a person because of the polymers and the waxes and the new surfaces and everything else. And I am wholeheartedly feel sympathetic for the fact that now you're sitting here and I, as a businessman and many others, knew that you can't build twice the size facility for the same cost going forward. And it would seem that both my concern and others' concern, and now you're the poor gentleman that's left here trying to staff it on those levels. And as Gene Chandler would say many times, my opinion may not carry at the end of the day. I'm just voicing my opinion. So.
So, I guess the logical choice, or I guess in this particular situation, would be, would we consider moving $15,000 from the plant operations department over to the housekeeping department? And just make an just exchange that money. And they can fight it out as they wish. But if the problem is that the money for plant operations was misappropriated, is what it sounds like to me, based on kind of our generic talks earlier versus what they are feeling encumbered by now. So, because I can corroborate Representative McConkey's comments there, that was exactly what we were told when we exactly asked that question, that the cleaning of the floors were going to be far easier because they were going to have a machine and it wasn't going to matter, and and so that sounds like a misappropriation of where that $15,000 should go to me.
I would be in agreement. If they find it's different.
I mean, we're going to meet again, so we can listen to that perhaps at that time. But as presented to us, that was the situation. Commissioner West?
While you're shuffling funds here, Mr. Chairman, one thing I'd be interested to know, on a plant operations, they're appropriating $20,000 more for a new building. Why? What is going to drive the cost on a brand new building, year old, it's going to take $20,000 more in maintenance?
Yes. Yeah,
they've already got 20, now they want 20 more.
Yes, and I can understand because I had the same question last week, but they were kind enough to answer the question, and that was being that in the first year that there were maintenance contracts that were part of the new equipment. You install a new air handler, and therefore you get 1 year of maintenance and on it as well. So now those have expired, and we're going to have to start paying for the maintenance contracts.
Could we ask for a breakdown of where that $20,000 for new service contracts are going to come from? I know one will be the elevator because we didn't have any elevators.
I am sure we can ask, and I'm almost sure it was provided. I know we can ask.
We have 3 elevators that get inspected and serviced. We have a fire system that's much more complicated. I think Bob's now carrying 2 emergency generators. A lot of mechanical, just cleaning the fire hoods in dining services. There's a lot of things that were free the first year that all of a sudden become a burden. I think Bob carries part of the nurse call system.
Excuse me, Howard, I'd have to ask what the $20,000 originally was for then.
No, let's find out.
If they're now not being covered, we still paid $20,000 the first year for something, for maintenance.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Over at the jail, one of the items that came up was their generator over there. And you have 2 generators over here, they have one, there might be more in the complex. The court system now has one. And when we asked the jail superintendent why he was not using the same contractor that was being used over here, his response was that he had a Caterpillar and you might have...
They had a Cummings and they had a...
Yeah, Black & Decker or whatever it was. So they weren't using the same one. We had a further discussion on that most companies now are servicing several brands. Are any of these contracts, have you had an opportunity to have a conversation, or has Bob had a chance to have a conversation to start looking at our total facility and seeing if we can start going with the same vendors and if there's going to be a savings of economy there?
Well, if we haven't, we should. I'm sure the initial contract went with whoever the general contractor, chose or the committee approved to, if it's an own-in generator, whoever installed it, and probably continued with service there. But now that we own it, we should be looking at how we can service it most effectively.
Paula?
And again, shame on us or shame on the commissioners that you build a brand new building and don't account for maintenance costs going forward, that the people we're paying to be in charge of speccing our buildings and our costs, and I think it comes down to that company that started figuring out our costs going forward, we certainly should have been alerted that in year 2, we were going to start experiencing a doubling effect of costs. That's horrible.
And I don't, but that $20,000 increase is somewhat mitigated by the fact that previously, if you look in 2010, on what we actually spent on that same line, it was almost $40,000. So
old facility, Mr. Chairman?
That would have been the old facility.
That in the old facility. So there was, so your comments are well taken, because obviously the lowest bid on the generator may not have been as wise as making sure we had the same generator as they have over at the jail, so we could consolidate the maintenance going forward. That doesn't change that statement whatsoever. However, that at least to that end, that the overall maintenance cost on that line is relatively consistent now that we're off the 1-year standard installations, new warranty, including that maintenance. Right.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Representative.
We're coming upon 2 o'clock, and I'm just wondering, as much as it is beneficial, I think, to talk about these individual items, I also think that it's administration's responsibility to manage their budget, and we're looking at a 3.7% increase budget year to budget year, and I'm wondering if we have a sense of, do we want a 3.7% increase, do we want a 3.3% increase, and can we say to the administrator, as good as this budget is, and as significant as the reduction to taxes is, we would like to see some efficiencies, and go find them.
Well, I don't disagree. I guess I don't disagree with that. I'm sure that they will be trying to find some efficiencies in regard, into those regards.
Mr. Chair?
My basic impetus for today's meeting, though, was to really talk about the increases in employees, because I knew that when we went before the full delegation, that there was going to be some angst regarding any new employees, because it was iterated and reiterated that we weren't going to be needing any more employees.
2 people.
Other than those 2 people, you know, which, you know, and so I knew there was going to be angst, and so beyond that, I think everything else is pretty vanilla. You know, it's, you know, the idea of increasing the wages, we're going to need to really look at that, and the idea of increasing the authorizing the increase in some hours, we're going to really maybe take a look at that. You know, otherwise,
I think there's an activity aide in there too. So there's a third person, that full-time activity aide. So I don't want to.
Right, we haven't got there yet.
Okay,
That's the next page. So we need to. So I mean, I think those are the important things. I mean, I try to iterate during the course of the meeting that, you know, kind of the opposite of what the government generally has is a spending problem. What we're trying to enhance, what we're trying to enhance here is our revenue situation, and that will be the solution to, you know, most of what we're looking at here is trying to enhance that revenue by having a more profitable revenue streams in certain areas. And it's only 5 people a year we're looking at changing. It essentially is what it comes down to. 5 or 6 bed days a year. That's all we're looking at doing in order to hopefully, you know, enhance that revenue enough to compensate our final number down to where it's starting to become palatable around that $200,000 figure. And if it's even more enhanced by getting some people actually coming here as opposed to staying in Laconia, or, you know, hopefully with a year after that, we may be right there where we're looking at, you know, not in an operational type, you know, even keel. So, but go ahead, Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I'm reading this correctly, we're going to have a $434,000 increase. Is that okay? What happens if expenses? What happens if we turn it to them and say, look, we're willing to spend $300,000? What can you do with the $3,000? We make a decision and go that way and say, you got $300,000, how do you spend it? And let them make the decision how they're going to spend that money. We've lowered the budget. They can decide their priorities.
Well, once again, I guess I'll, you know, in my response to that, I'll just state that, you know, beyond these increases that we see, there isn't much else, and I think that the delegation, when presenting in front of the delegation, that's going to be their #1 concern. I mean, I may be wrong about that, but I think that's what we're going to be looking at, just, you know, overall. And, you know, and the other things, when you get right down to it, if you look at that, how much money did you say? If you take out the increases in salaries, that's it. You know, there isn't a lot in photocopier expense. There isn't a lot, you know, those things we've towed the line on.
There may be savings in other lines that are not staff. And if we want to maximize the product, providing direct service to the clients, to the patients, is the primary concern. So if we can control somewhere and still have 32 hours of a housekeeper that's going to make the environment better, or one medication nursing assistant, or one recreational therapist that's going to make a significant difference in the product that the nursing home provides, then shouldn't they have the ability to find that place to manage that position?
Sign the paper? Sign the attendance? I don't know where it is. It's floating around. Somebody has the attendance sheet.
Yes. All right, well, I think that's a point well taken, and that's certainly open for presentation when we meet again. They can find out. I'm assuming that's most of that's been looked into, but, you know, Director Chandler has been here for 5 months. He didn't put together this budget, so maybe he sees some areas of additional savings. And I don't discount those. I don't discount those comments, but we do allow some latitude within their budgets to start moving some of the money appropriation lines around, you know, within the department. So they're allowed some of that latitude as well. So if they have that cushion, we'll call it, in some areas, they can adjust that, you know, as they manage it and they see fit. That's why I kind of like that idea, is it allows them to manage their budget, you know, within those constraints. But, so I fully agree. If it can be done, it can be done. And if, you know, overall we're looking at bringing those numbers down, that's on the expense side, that's great. But, you know, I think that those justifications for those additional hours are going to be contended. There's going to be a contention. So I'm just either trying to make sure we're lock, stock, and barrel, or we're not. You know, what can we do? Go ahead.
Another perspective, and not at all belittling our need to minimize expenses at all points. But even at this stage, it still represents $250,000 essentially net savings on a projected budget. That's not a bad day as we continue to move to self-sufficiency. So it's trending not in a minimal way, but in a very significant way. A $250,000 positive swing, even with increased expenses, is not a bad. It really is not a bad initial proposal. But no one's going to be offended at the need to look at, justify, and have to defend any increases in expenses. You can never have a budget that's so wonderful that managing expenses does not make sense.
And maybe we should just review how much we are charging per day for private pay and when that increase was. You know,
we're looking at a number of different ways to enhance revenue, including how we can recover more money from Medicare for non-therapy based services. There's a nursing component. Becky and I met with a new hospice group from the Seacoast that provides some opportunity for recovery from hospice that could be some $460 a day. Now, we would project that might not be for more than 30 or 40 days a year. But here again, 30, 40 days, $450 a day, it all starts to add up. So we're looking at how we can increase our revenue sources without having to increase corresponding expense in the process. So we're hoping to maximize revenues and at the same time to minimize expenses, of course.
Okay. Well, let's take a look at that last. We'll call it person. What I have written down is 48 weekly FTEs, and that's under the salaries of the recreational therapy.
The activity program we have is, remember again, same as with housekeeping, 7 days a week. The idea is, well, we really have 8 different neighborhoods, 4 different mountains. You know, in the evenings when you have 1 or 2 people working, it generally means that there's going to be half or more of the place that isn't getting the attention that we would like to be able to give people. And so it's really a matter of quality. It's not bad without it, but it's not where we would like to see it on weekends and on evenings.
So this is 48 hours a week.
I think it's just 40.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. So it is 40.
Just 1 FTE.
And that would break down to what? I mean, right down on the nuts and bolts of your schedule.
Well, on the one hand, it would allow us to increase more staffing, but we're also finding our activity staff has all been here a while. They have a tremendous amount of vacation time. So we have not just the need to expand to evenings and weekends, but unlike an aide, when an aide calls out, you bring somebody else in. An activity aide is out, we don't call somebody else in. It means at different times, we're even during the day, we're running short of the 4 people on complement that we'd like to have. So part of it would be vacation and sick time fill-in, and part of it would be to pick up these weekend and evening hours that we're presently running subpar on.
So essentially, and I apologize because I just want to follow up, that as it relates directly to the schedule, a weekly schedule, you're the add to that schedule will be?
It'd be evening and weekends for
For how
part of
many
those
hours?
hours, but we have so many vacation and sick hours to fill that it's also going to be a good portion of those hours would also be translated into vacation replacement, especially during the summer.
Okay, so I guess I apologize, I have to ask the question again, but let me, I guess, as an example, what the example be is our plan is to add an additional person from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. on the schedule every day of the week for 7 days, and that's 14 hours, and then the rest of the 26 hours is attributable to our unfunded vacation and sick time that we need to make up for.
It would be, at least half would be to bolster the existing daytime hours, and the other half would be to bolster evening and weekend hours, especially weekend evening hours, where I think we're running the lightest.
I'm going to try one more time to ask the question is, you currently have a schedule of these folks in recreational therapy, and it's, I don't know what it is. It might be two of them during the day from 7 to 3, and one person from 3 to 11, and I'm not sure.
Right.
Okay. So I'm just trying to get an idea of, and I do understand that some of it is consumed by the fact that you're having to replace some of these 8-hour shifts. But, if this is approved, what will be the change to your schedule for the hourly per week? Are you going to have one person here an additional 3 hours on Monday and 2 hours on Tuesday? How does that?
That'll need to get you a specific proposal, because most of our programming wraps up around 7 o'clock. So whether or not we go 4 to 7 with a 3-hour shift and have 5 of those shifts, but it'd be best, rather than me speculating and potentially misleading you, to come up with that, to work with Susan on a specific proposal for exactly how those hours would be.
Okay, because I think from where I sit, that's what I'm looking at. What does this mean? What are we doing now? What does that mean? And if that is something that we feel is going to enhance the overall experience. Representative McConkey.
Thank you.
Sorry I had to keep asking questions.
Could you enlighten me as to what activities this person does? 2 or 3 activities? Is this social? I don't understand. What sort of things does a person do?
Well, it actually varies depending on which neighborhood they're working in. In memory support and with Alzheimer's, it can be everything from group. We trying to be efficient, try to focus on group activities rather than one-on-one activities. And so whether that group is a music program, whether it's a crafts program, something that involves, or an exercise program, kind of a collective group type thing is what's best. But sometimes it's also, with some people, it's a very individual program. Sometimes it's helping to coordinate big events, like there's actually a potluck dinner that some of you saw the dinner that we saw was actually coordinated by activities to be a potluck dinner with residents, and they had a great time.
Okay. May I ask this? What's their starting time in the day?
7 o'clock and 8 o'clock.
7 and 8 a.m. in the morning.
Right.
Is there any consideration, seeing you told me that we have staff that's been with us a long amount of time, is there any thought of time shifting these people? So we started, I care for my mother in the house, and I can tell you there's not a lot of activity this morning right till I was ready to leave before she's ready to get going for the day. But you're telling me that there's a need later in the evening for activities. Is there a possibility of time, instead of a 7 o'clock start, that no one likes change, there are 9 o'clock start with just got me up to 2 more hours of service, which I think probably would be more productive hours than 7 o'clock in the morning.
No,
is that a thought?
There's no reason why an 11 o'clock in the morning to a 7 o'clock at night shift, there's still an 8-hour shift, can't be considered. It might even be welcomed by some staff. So and there's no reason why not.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Commissioner Evans.
Just to add one more little thought here, I don't know who's asking about vacation times, but last year, this facility had to give or had to offer, Sandy did the research, it was 6,600 hours of family leave time that we have no control over. Yes, some is taken up on vacation time, some taken up salary, but A, we have to pay other people, and B, we have to fill those slots.
Same's true for the jail.
Yeah. I don't know what the hours were there.
That family leave policy really hurts us.
And that was brought up at the last meeting, that's why I was discussing that, because there is no, you know, paid sick time. That's just absorbed through their salaries. They absorb that. There's not a separate line to help, you know, consider that this person's going to have 2 weeks off in his pay, so therefore we'd have to pay someone else. That's why I asked that question, how much of this is actually going to go onto the schedule and how much of it is part of the need to absorb these other situations.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question for an answer for our next meeting? And perhaps you took care of this last week. If you did, I apologize. The cafe personnel, the kitchen personnel, and we have a cafe, and it's showing a revenue stream of $30,000 extra income coming in. And I've had the pleasure of being there on several occasions, and you have a cashier that's associated with that. Is that cashier part of the rest of the part of her day is working in your kitchen as a regular person? Is that an added person? Is there any cost associated with that cafe that should really be coming out of that $30,000 or whatever it is, that it's really being expensed in the right place?
There is additional cost. Is it really being expensed out? Our bookkeeping doesn't allow for that, because roughly she's there from 11 to 1. This is 2 hours of that time. But there's also the preparation time for preparing the other meals, and that's actually where the bulk of the cook hours would need to be factored into that, to know whether we're making money or losing money.
That might be an awfully good discussion. I'm only saying that because it is being offered to us that we're seeing, what's the number, $33,000?
I think 35.
$35,000 in income, and this is like processing wood. It's not a net income is not really that, so you don't have to do that now, but I would really think we should be prepared to start talking about what our expenses really are.
I think Rob said he'd do that in the last meeting, didn't he? We asked him to come up with a rough figure on the food expenses.
Did your panini machine move forward last week while I wasn't here?
I tried my best to represent your position regarding the panini machine.
What machine?
Panini.
Yeah, as part of the capital budget for dietaries, $900 for the panini grill, and it seemed like the recoup on that, based on the need for that, seemed a little askew. Kind of jumped off the page at some of us. So it is certainly a consideration.
Still out there. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we haven't nixed it off of there, but there's certainly ample opportunity to discuss that as something that we could vote to remove and just stick with the ones you can buy for $75 from Home Depot for a while more. And that's just, I won't waste your time with this little anecdote, but it's a good one. But I will anyway. The trick to that, when you go to Home Depot and to buy kitchen equipment, is buy two, okay? Because I bought 2 Black & Decker toasters at Walmart 5 years ago, and I got 2 because they were like $15, and I'm like, the first one's going to blow up, so I'm going to have the second one in reserve, so I can replace the first one just like that for $15 instead of spending, $150 for a commercial toaster. Okay, I installed the first Black & Decker toaster, and it worked, and it worked, and it worked, and it worked. 3 years has gone by, that one toaster is still working. So I'm like, what the heck? So then I brought up the other toaster and put them both out, and they both are still working. So if you ever want something to work forever, buy 2 of them and put one away to replace the other one. Because it worked like a charm for me. So anyway, sorry.
So you want two $900 panini?
No. My recommendation is to buy two $60 panini machines and put one in the back room, and that first one will last forever. Okay, so as far as the revenues are concerned, we had some discussion at the meeting about the revenues. And what we're at 10:15, so we're going to try to wrap another 15 minutes and then we'll be done. This is certainly something that's worth, a discussion. That we could, possibly help bring down the amount of taxes due this time around by increasing the revenue projections. And there may be a little wiggle room for that because I think we are pretty conservative. And the differential between our projected, our budgeted differential, which is what, 1.5?
1.571.
Right, 1.571, and the reality that we, even if things just stay according to Hoyle, we probably, only lose 600,000 or 700,000. So, is there, there may be room for a few more, couple $100,000 or a few $100,000 in the revenue line that would still be conservative, and it would still be, and would be functionally to the advantage of the taxpayer for this one budget cycle. But, this budget cycle, we are looking at some pressures. We have $500,000 that the commissioners have put in from the bond money, which is also part of this $1.2 million about still left in the bond money that, the delegation was using in consideration for the renovations necessary at the annex. So that bond money is receiving pressures from a couple places. So if we could, replace some of that pressure of taking $500,000 from that bond money to reduce taxes, and this time around, there may be some logic behind maybe being a little bit more cavalier with our revenues. So I guess to that end and that ilk is, for our next meeting, if we were to find $300,000 in revenues, where would be the most conservative spot that we could find it? That we could still feel like we'll make it,
We will take another look to see if there's something we could have confidence in.
Because I know some of it is it's hard to know how much pro-share money you're going to get, but there may be some logic into, I hate the word finding, but to enhance the revenues conservatively, but still, be very confident that we'll reach those levels, even, in the worst case scenario functions.
Even though it's been consistent over the past few years that could have been possible, this year is probably one of the scariest in terms of revenue, just not knowing what's going to happen as the process changes, as we expand Medicaid and, the streams are going to be different. So it's scary, I think.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing that scares us the most is the pro-share money. Perhaps, and that we don't know what's happening,
and that we don't control.
And that in this budget, there's $600,000 of pro-share money in this budget in that Medicaid room and board. That $600,000 of that $6.9 million is pro-share.
What do you mean by pro-share?
Pro-share money. I'm going to let Paula explain it better because it's. Yes. The pro-share, my best layman's explanation, because that's really the only level I have of it, is that it's it's a redistribution of the Medicaid money that's distributed through the state. So you don't know exactly how much it's going to be. But there's a pretty good assurance that we're going to get some. In previous years, before last budget cycle was the first year, we put in the $600,000 of pro-share money that we were going to get it, because we've always gotten it, we're going to get it. So that's in this budget. But that money is so nebulous that it's very, very scary. And we got $1 million, right? We budgeted for $600,000 and we received this year $1 million, correct? I think that, well, that, I believe, from my recollections, what Kathy Gary said, we actually received $1 million, we budgeted $600,000, okay? So, but that money is very nebulous. So we're trying to stay away from that money and maybe trying to look at our revenues and the things that we have, be able to have a little tighter grip on. So we're not just going, oh, we're going to get this in the pro-share money, because that's probably not the best place for us to be looking at where we might be able to increase our revenue.
When you look at our last 3 years, each year we've increased our revenues. Next year we're budgeting for a decrease. I could start to feel reasonably comfortable at about the $300,000 range if we budgeted for next year what we got this year. And, you know, not to project beyond that, you know, it doesn't leave as much cushion, but it still leaves seemingly a lot of cushion. But as long as we do something like that, eyes open, $300,000 is big.
Saying here, this is what we got.
So,
And this is what
I mean, that would be, I guess, I mean, for our next meeting, if you guys could, you know, come up with that, with, you know, the type of revenue streams where we, you know, feel like we have some control over by providing good service, expanding our skilled care, and that sort of thing. That would be probably in our best advantage in staying away from the yikes revenue streams.
Well, and with a track record of 3 years at the very least, seeing that trend and just budgeting for the same next year would seem to be prudent. I mean, and that's, I think, the test that we're all going to be held accountable to. Was it a prudent assumption, or was it a, you know, pie in the sky? I think budgeting for the same as what we achieved this year, which isn't that much more than, well, $600,000 more than last year, would seem to be, the previous year, would seem to be prudent.
Okay. Commissioner Babson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, this pro-share, am I correct or incorrect? Is it tied to the bed tax? When we're taxed and it goes and the money comes back to the state, some goes to paying the hospitals that, for the people that don't pay. Is pro-share the other portion out of that comes back to us?
My answer will be brief, but because I have limited knowledge, but because I don't know for sure, but I can tell you this, is that it is not the bed tax money.
Right.
The bed tax money is contained in other spots on our budget where we pay it in, paid out. And we spoke about that, and I asked Kathy Gary about that specifically. Is this part of the bed tax? She says, no, it's in this line, in the Medicaid room and board.
But why does it come to us is what I'm after.
It's a redistribution of these funds that filter down. It's, you know, she is really a better person, I think, to help us understand the full breadth of that, because that is not.
It's always been mystery money. It's never been in our budget, and it always comes back 600, 500, 300, and nobody knows what it is.
Right, and I think maybe we need to know more about it, but it is, and if we did know more about it, we'd probably feel more comfortable with the budgeting of it. We budgeted $600,000 because presumably we felt comfortable that we'd at least get that amount of money, if not more. It's my understanding that we did get $1 million as opposed to $600,000. I know that it is not the bed tax, but it is a redistribution of this Medicaid money that the state does, and then they send it to us. But how it's figured, I'm not 100% sure. So maybe we could ask Kathy Gary to maybe give us an idea of how they come up with that so we can maybe look at it next time. But to that end, that's why I want to stay away from it, because we don't know about it. Let's try to, you know, for that $300,000, it's not a big number. Let's see if we can find it in the things we know about. And let that stay away. You know, we feel like, well, we got a little control over it. We can fulfill our own destiny. Not try to revenue on.
Crank it up, bud. Find out what it is.
All right, so
With the road check.
People down south.
my
I'll ask Sue.
best guess is that we'll probably meet on a. No, I'm not going to guess. We're going to meet in February, at least a week before that date of the 22nd at the minimum. So, you know, I'm hopeful that it'll be on a Monday, but I know it's that the February Mondays are a little tight because of the President's Day. So we'll take a look at that, and we'll go from there. We're meeting the 22nd for the next delegation meeting, so it'll probably be...
The 11th? The 18th is the President's Day, and
Okay.
Monday before then is the 11th. That's if we're going on Monday.
Okay. Well, that sounds like a pretty good day to me to pencil in. The 11th, Monday the 11th, we'll meet in the morning, like at 10. Not too early, not too late, but we'll meet at 10 on that Monday.
Would you suspect a couple hours, so if I arrange a subcommittee meeting afterwards for 12:30, it might be safe?
I think so. I think we can wrap it up, do whatever voting we need to do, and come up with our recommendations in that amount of time.
Sounds good.
You know, because like I said, I think we've got it down to just a couple issues. The extra hours, the revenues. That's basically what it comes down to me. You know, you guys are doing a great job. Don't say enough. And because this is very difficult, you know, to sit there and listen to us. And we appreciate that. And very much so.
You're the same people that made this place possible. I'm nothing but appreciative. It's a wonderful place that you have here. You all have great reason to be proud.
So, in keeping with that, we might review some of the mission statement stuff. You know, we're supposed to be looking at some of this annex as well stuff. And I think that...
Could I bring up something on the annex real quick, just to
Absolutely.
tell you what I found? Public Works and Highways, we did a tour last week, and we toured this men's and women's state prison. We have finances going through next week also. But we came back to the old state hospital grounds in Concord. And we had a tremendous facility there, campus there, empty buildings that go from 1800s to 1970 and so forth. And the state had been spending money everywhere in Concord and surrounding towns for offices on leases that we couldn't control. We owned a lot of buildings on site. This sounds a lot like the old nursing home annex. So we have been rehabilitating and bringing state agencies in. We just toured the latest building that we're working on there, which brought in all the licensings, whether it was cosmetology, barbers, plumbers, everybody else will be under one roof, shared reception as, copier, so forth. Our cost there that we bonded is for a building that's very similar to what we have is in the $1.15 to $1.20 a square foot. And we took in long-term tenants, which we have anyways, are going to be with us the rest of our lives. And we're charging at $9.45 a square foot for that space. And we're seeing savings. So I want to spend a little bit of time, I will spend a little bit of time on the research we had from years previous on what we were looking at, costs that we were looking at, the cooperative extension and so forth, and see if those numbers are in line, because these are real numbers that we're working with and we're feeling comfortable with. So if you wouldn't mind, I'll try and work up a little scenario looking backwards and forward and bring that forward to committee next time.
Okay, well that's, that sounds great. And, I think from our perspective, to the commissioners is that we need to if we saw some interest coming in, like, you know, 4 things that were reasonable for us, that were long-term, that were doable, that would be something we'd certainly look at. And, you know, I'm sorry, Commissioner Kennedy, I don't mean not look at you when I'm talking to the commissioners. And it would certainly be helpful if we were if we had more ideas about what were the possibilities. I mean, I guess there's something going on behind the job lots for Department of Health and Human Services for office space. Around 10,000 square feet that they were looking at.
I think it's somewhere in there. We located our offices, yes.
From Conway to a more centralized area. Well, we've got 2 wings with 5,000 square feet in each of them. You know, and so I believe I thought we looked into a little bit about maybe this, and then we heard that, oh, it's just a short-term lease, and they will only go over so much time, and that sort of thing. But, you know, certainly the options of either renting or selling for the, you know, changing condo, however you want to put it, those wings is certainly open in my book as a possibility. But what's not open as a possibility is just in perpetuity, just letting them sit there. You know, without any reason to think that we have a plan to fill them that's not going to cost the taxpayers money. You know, that's the other end of the thing, because eventually those are going to become a problem. Like any old building becomes, they start becoming a problem. And the insurance
is this subcommittee charged after we do the budget to look at that issue?
No. Yes. Apparently we are, and we haven't discussed, we are. And I'm alluding to this now because we have those forces of using $500,000 from the bond money to offset taxes in a kind of low vicarious way, but that's what essentially that's what's happening. We're going to use that $500,000 of 1.2, leaving $700,000, versus using that $1.2 million to do whatever possible renovations that we might need to do at the annex, over in the annex. And as Representative McConkey stated, at $10 per square foot, $1.2 million, we're looking at being able to renovate 12,000 square feet for that. And that's about just a little over 2/3 of the size of just this core. So that's what we have to spend for that. The rest of the money we got to, you know, it's going to have to be because somebody wants to invest in it.
And is there a time frame in terms of decisions on that?
There is a time frame, and it is running out. We need, I believe, that money.
A little over a year, Mr. Chairman, I believe.
Left. I mean, we
March
could.
of next year, the
Right.
bond money has to be either returned or used.
So there is some time, but we have until next budget cycle to spend it out.
But that means a decision needs to be made this budget cycle in order to figure it out.
No, well, what it means is that we could theoretically just spend out the money on the next budget,
right.
And not quote unquote lose it because we didn't do anything over there.
Got it.
You know, that might not be the most prudent plan, but I mean, if we don't use the money, that $500,000 on this budget doesn't mean, and we don't renovate, doesn't mean we lose it.
Got it.
So that's, you know, where I sit, and I'm shooting from the hip based on, thank you very much, Commissioner Babson's knowledge.
It could be off a couple of months, but it's about a year and
right.
2 or 3 months.
So we have a little time to, because it's either got to go to reducing the overall tax rate, so to speak, or it's got to go to building something. We are limited by that, and it takes a 2/3 vote of the delegation to use that money. Not just a majority. So that's where that sets, and that's by statute. And I hope I didn't misspeak on much of that. Does that sound correct?
That seems to be my recollection.
I think it's about right.
Yeah, so, but we definitely should be looking at, is that going to be an issue? Is if we have to spend out that money and not have until the next budget cycle to do it? Because if that is the case, we need to.
Perhaps Commissioner Kenny would know, she's been here working on it. I don't know.
No. Well, that would be something that we definitely need to find out, because if we have to have it done by this budget cycle, then that changes. I mean, obviously, we're not only going to put in $500,000 if it's the last budget cycle. I'm hoping that the commissioners at least I'm assuming the commissioners had that much foresight, is that they, but maybe that they, didn't. Go ahead.
You know two things. Number one, it has to go into a capital project if it stays here.
Right.
And number two, it's my understanding that if you're going to use it, the only thing you can do is pay down the principal, which results in a tax savings to the taxpayer. But you can't put it in the bank and just pay the interest on it. You have to pay a lump sum back against it.
Right, but there's a time limitation, which I believe is
Yes.
3 years after the completion of the
Yep.
project. And the project was completed, I mean, unofficially, we moved in September. So it'll be 3 years a year, right?
It'll be 2 years. We finished one, this past September was the first year. And so September 2013 will be the end of the second year of completion.
Okay, so it sounds like we have time.
Yeah.
Because before that, because that's my recollection. Does that sound right? 3 years from the completion of the project?
Yeah, that's about what I said. That's about a year and a half. I said a year and 3 months. So.
Yeah, so it sounds like we've got the next budget cycle to worry about, so. Whew. Okay, crisis averted. And so I guess that's it, is review. That's what we're looking for, some revenues, a little more ideas about those FTEs. Certainly if, the idea of using other money instead is fine by us. Just don't necessarily have to tell us, but where that might be. And that's it. We'll look at the mission statement next time. Did everybody get one where the draft new mission statement and the previous mission statement? Does everybody have that? Because I think that's of interest, is the mission of the staff of Mountain View Nursing Home to provide an environment which the residents can realize the highest possible quality of life. It is our belief that this mission will best be attained by providing physical, medical, emotional, and spiritual support for each resident in a loving, compassionate, home-like atmosphere where they may achieve their fullest potential. And then, get that? It doesn't sound like the mission statement that I heard that we voted on.
That was the old one.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I have to go on the time.
Okay.
Ed, can I put, are you taking yours?
You need a card?
Okay, I'm all set.
Oh.
Yeah, I did right there.
Have a great trip.
Where?
We'll see you tomorrow.
My store.
Perhaps. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
The White House?